we saw the fire door of the gym near us open, and he's getting ready to shoot us. You could still hear gunfire, so we're staying on the ground because we don't know what's happening.
A man believed to be a local and armed with a gun burst into Dunblane Primary School and began firing.
That man doesn't deserve to be remembered, not after what he did.
Parents gathered outside to try and find out what had happened. And at a school annex, the news was broken about the children and teacher who'd been killed.
All media were all standing on the other side of the road, and I remember there was quite a lot of us actually turned our backs so that we weren't watching it.
Obviously what happened is horrific, beyond most people's comprehension.
After the sound of gunfire, confusion and bewilderment, a stricken crowd of parents waiting to be told who lived and who died. And the ambulances were still leaving. They were driving past people, parents, who were running the other way. And the anxiety of waiting for news. The community now verging on the edge of despair.
It was just after 9:30, I seem to remember, and we were sitting in the class doing work, and suddenly you hear what sounds like gunfire, and you're looking up there in the direction, and you're thinking, yeah, that is definitely gunfire. But at the same time, there's one side of your mind saying, no, it can't be. Something else must be happening. Yeah. I know that quite a lot of the pupils in my class were over near the windows looking up to see what happened. I wasn't. I was in the middle of the room at my desk. But then we saw the fire door of the gym near us open, and he's getting ready to shoot us, and we just went to ground very, very quickly. Unfortunately, I just got that one piece of glass hitting me in the face, which cut me.
I didn't know what was happening, and I just wandered into the school. I noticed it was very quiet. I walked into the nursery class and I knew there was something badly wrong, but I didn't know what it was. Mrs. Isles just asked me to come in, and just sat, and when I got a chance I asked her what was going on, and she told me there's a man had gone mad in the gym and shot. She had heard it was a teacher and a pupil, and then we just spent the next, I don't know how long it was, just waiting, wandering, trying to keep the children unaware that there's anything wrong. And Mrs. Isles was called out of the classroom to help to go to the gym. And I just found out that at that stage I knew it was primary 1, and then I found out that it wasn't my daughter's class, and I felt relieved, and then I felt terribly guilty that I felt relieved.
You know, you can feel fear, and I knew there's something had happened. As the morning went on, I realised I was I was told that you know, quietly I was told there's a man that's run amok with a gun. My first reaction was, oh, you know, be a man with a shotgun. I don't know. So an angry parent, or I don't know. I didn't think anybody was injured or anything like that. I did, but as the time went on, I was left on my own in the class, which I knew was definitely something very seriously wrong. And when Mrs. Isles came back, she said, I said, you know what's happened? And she goes, I don't know how many bodies I've identified. And I just walked away from her. I just thought, bodies. I mean, it hadn't occurred to me, anything like that, anything. And as it came out, I just was overwhelmed by people were calling out and asking me questions, and I was dazed. I mean, and there was cameras, and I mean, there was the world media was there. And then, of course, I realised then, you know, the true horror of what had happened. And well, it'll never leave you. You know, I feel I can remember every minute of that day. It shouldn't have happened.
No.
You know, it wasn't. And you know, you felt deeply affected, and for a long time. And anyway, you know.
Such a large primary school with several hundred pupils has many old girls and boys who will remember Gwen Mayer, the teacher shot dead.
Oh, she was a brilliant teacher, you know, full of life and cheerful, and you know, can't believe that she's gone.
We had her the first year that she came to the school.
Yeah,
And
we were first class.
She was really friendly.
Yeah,
And
she was easy to talk to, and you know.
She made sure that you got on well with her, sort of thing.
Yeah.
She made sure that you know, you enjoyed
Yeah,
being
she'd
in her
sort all
class.
problems out for you, and she's just a brilliant teacher. I'll never forget her.
So I was actually getting ready to go to uni, and I heard it on the radio. I heard there'd been an incident. I was drying my hair, put the hairdryer off, and just got the tail end of that there'd been an incident in Dunblane. And of course, at first, you just think, you know, what's the chances? What's the, you know, so straight on the phone, trying to get my dad. And then it was just a kind of build-up of everything was being narrowed down, which for us wasn't a good thing. You know, which school it was, you know, which class it was, you know, that it was primary one, that how many adults were involved. And so the chances of there being a good outcome were becoming less and less. And then it took until about 3 o'clock until my dad was finally told that it was my mum, and he phoned to tell me. And I had to go to the airport, you know, it's like, and sit, you know, waiting for the plane on my own. You know, I wasn't allowed to, obviously, to take anyone through, and everybody, and it was a flight coming up to Scotland, so everybody on the flight was talking about it, and I'm just trying to get through people to get to my seat. And the air stewardess actually came over and spoke to me and said, you know, we understand you're flying in difficult circumstances. If there's anything we can do to help, offered me a drink, I think. And the same at the other end, you know, the whole flight had to sit until I was escorted off the plane, which is really unusual, because the first thing when any plane lands, everybody's just desperate to get up, and the pilot had made an announcement, and my dad was waiting with a police officer. I was sitting next to two ladies and kind of got to talking to them about it, and obviously they were quite shocked. But that's as far as I know, as far as anybody on the plane know. I mean, I dread to think what they must have thought when you're getting escorted off a plane, you know.
So my first memory is of being in the corridor outside of our row of classrooms. We were walking along the corridor and then stopped and seemed to wait there for a while. I wasn't aware of what was going on. I can remember seeing holes appearing in the glass in front of us in the windows, and like chunks of plaster being taken out of the wall behind us. And then I can remember looking over the playground, because the windows opened out into a playground, and opposite that was the gym where the shooting was taking place, and there was a figure in the doorway. I mean, I don't remember details. I wouldn't be able to say that it was definitely a certain person, but from knowing the events and obviously seeing that and learning, not seeing at the time, but learning that we were being shot at, I realised that it was, you know, who we know caused the tragedy. And then from there, I remember we had to get down on our hands and knees and crawl back to our classroom. So we went into a classroom, and there was so many of us, and we were behind the teacher's desk, sat on the floor, hiding behind the desk.
Driving into Dunblane, I remember I could hear sirens. That was it. The first memory was the sirens going into Dunblane. It's not a big place, so I think I literally abandoned the car somewhere near the centre of the town and ran towards the school. And there were people running everywhere. The first thing that I remember, parents running up beside you and past you at the same time as myself and other journalists who were there at the time. And I remember we congregated on the other side of the road to allow parents to go up the school side. And the worst we just felt that we shouldn't be watching it because you could see the fear and panic on these parents' faces. This was all happening. It was like real time playing out in front of us. It was happening as we were there. The parents were arriving. There were parents who were being hived off somewhere else. The journalists media were all standing on the other side of the road, and I remember there was quite a lot of us actually turned our backs so that we weren't watching it.
A siren signalling the arrival of another child with bullet wounds. Doctors from all the city's health centres had rushed to the school to give what treatment they could, until paramedics arrived to ferry them under police escort to the nearby Stirling infirmary. A consultant paediatrician, one of the first at the school gym, described the scene that confronted him.
The children were very quiet, but of course they had all been injured, and so they were in shock both because of the injuries and presumably also emotional shock.
When the police and Scottish office gave a joint news conference this morning, they told what the first officer on the scene had found.
He found a scene of carnage where there's 15 children dead, one teacher dead, and one other dead. 12 were taken to hospital, and unfortunately one of the children taken there has since died. Among the 12 are 2 other adults. The one other person, we are in the process of trying to identify him, but could I say to you, we are not looking for anyone else in connection with this incident at this time. I'd also like to pay tribute to the headmaster, Ron Taylor, and his staff at the school, who have done magnificently well in keeping some little touch of normality or humanity existing in the school today.
I can't find the words to express the horror at what has happened in Dunblane here today. It's the last place in the world that one would expect a tragedy of this kind to occur, if one would expect it anywhere at all.
Shadow Scottish Secretary and local MP George Robertson lives in Dunblane. He talked, his voice barely under control.
All of my children went to this school. It's an act of unspeakable brutality and evil. And it's just difficult, I think, for anyone here and in the wider world to come to terms with what's happened in this primary school here today.
Quite the number of people that have been killed, I didn't find out until it was more in the media. I was asking my dad and other people things like, well, what happened to the guy who did it? What was? And they told me that, well, he'd killed himself. But it wasn't until later on in the media reports that you found out sort of how many people had been involved in it.
I remember turning to my best friend and almost hands on hips saying, oh, the builders upstairs, they're going to be in trouble, aren't they? Look at this mess, sort of. Really, there was no sense of the severity of what was happening because there just wasn't that thought there that could be real. We were in school, we were safe, we were, you know, it just didn't ring true that anything could be so far wrong. As far as I understand it, my mum was informed by getting a call from, I think, my auntie, and just saying, you know, is Amy okay and is my brother okay? And mum not knowing what had happened. And then obviously my auntie telling her that she'd seen on the news what had happened at the school, and mum just obviously got straight down to us, but I don't know how long they were waiting, but I know they were waiting outside the school for a long, long time.
It was just life-changing ever since then. You know, you certainly in the beginning, not so much now, but in the beginning, we were walking in eggshells because people were so reactive, you know, in a good way. I mean, the community in Bridge of Allen was just like they just put their arms around us. You know, people leaving food on the doorsteps, and just the kindness and support for us as a family. You know, being, you know, my mum had taught at Bridge of Allen. That was the first school she taught at. She taught at many schools in Central Region, and my mum and dad had lived there, you know, since the 70s. So they were well known in the community, and that was a real comfort, but also quite overwhelming at times.
Once we had been there a short while, I remember the police officer who was coordinating things at the time, Ian Gordon was his name, Superintendent Ian Gordon, and I think a lot of us knew him anyway, and he held kind of the first briefing, in which he told us that the perpetrator had killed himself in the situation, and that he obviously told us that a number of children were deceased. And I think it wasn't until that point that we actually realised the enormity of it. So when that became clear, I think I just remember that press conference in particular, everybody went silent as they took in what they were facing and what they were there, and it was almost like a palpable punch in the face. How can you imagine that? How can you imagine, you know, a classroom of 5-year-olds who are, let's face it, the most innocent, are just wiped off the face of the earth?
What was today called an act of unspeakable brutality and evil was planned here in this modest street by a former scoutmaster who today became a mass murderer.
Well, I've never known them to be angry.
You can't think of any reason why he might have a grudge against the school?
No. Because they seem to get on with everybody that I know of.
Had he not been in trouble, though, because of the clubs that he runs for young boys?
No. No, that I know of.
You didn't know that he kept lots of photographs?
Oh, aye, I know he's got photographs of the boys when they're out camping and things like that. But I never thought for 1 minute that he would do anything like that.
Because I didn't want to focus on him. I wanted to focus on the reality and those that lost their lives and respect that. And I think they deserve to be remembered. That man doesn't deserve to be remembered, not after what he did. And I think in some ways it's important to know about him and whatever went wrong that led him to do what he did that day and learn from that. But my priority is remembering the victims and sending love to those that were affected.
I wouldn't say he stood out as being anything as bad as he ultimately did, but I know that when he was coaching, like, he would be quite strict and rigid on like what boys as it was did what. It was quite, whereas nowadays in teaching children or training children, you're quite flexible in what people are doing. He was quite rigid by the rules. And so I didn't particularly enjoy it, and I wasn't there many weeks, but I certainly couldn't see him going on to do what he did.
I suppose I put it into a way that I took him right out of the equation completely. Don't mention his name. The best thing that happened was that there was no court case, no person in prison, no that.
You're just happy he took his own life and that was it?
Yeah, because we didn't have to deal with that. I don't give him any credit in my brain for anything. You know, what I deal with is the loss of my mum in such a horrific manner, And so I don't think there's ever been closure. I kind of describe it as like a wound that's really sore and bleeds, if you like, at first, and then it kind of scars over a wee bit, then something pokes at it and it reopens, you know, or something else triggers it to reopen, and but it's always there. That the wound's always there. They'll never be, because it's just something you never get over. You learn to live with it.
We've just had the opportunity over the last hour or so to meet the headmaster and the staff and many of the other people connected with the school, to express our thanks to them for the way they've handled the appalling tragedy they've had to cope with over the last few days.
We have seen for ourselves both the enormity of the evil act that was perpetrated at the school, but also the quite extraordinary courage and resilience of the staff, of everyone connected with the school and of the local community. And I know that we are both absolutely proud to have been here and to have paid our respect to them. This community has suffered so much, and yet there is such strength in it. There is such tremendous strength in it.
I never thought that I would see it in Scotland, certainly not in a community like Dunblane, and I think it's all the more shocking for that. But basically, if this can happen in Dunblane, it can happen anywhere.
We have the medical physical evidence from the pathology of what they deemed to be her injuries and how that would have come about, and witnesses from the scene of how heroic she was. And what I also believe is that, and I have to believe it to carry on, is that she lost her life to go with the children, because somebody had to go with them, and who better to take care of all the children than their teacher, who was there. And that's, in some way, it gives me a comfort. I mean, obviously there's nothing justifiable in what happened, but it gives me a little bit of comfort that she went with the children to kind of always be their kind of guardian. So I call her, I mean, there's 16 little angels, obviously, and then I always call my mum my big angel. She's the big angel, you know, that went to look after them. Obviously what happened is horrific beyond most people's comprehension, but, you know, there's the love for somebody and the happiness they brought you, that's still there, but it's obviously tinged with a huge amount of pain and sadness. 30 years seems quite profound, you know. It's quite hard to believe, I think, because I'm so much older now, and I'm older now than what my mum was, and so I'm at a different stage of life, and I've now lived through the stages of life that she did in a sense, and it just seems such, you know, I've had children that she's never met, you know, life's changed a lot, and there's always that sadness that she's never been a part of that.
There's no doubt that it stole a part of my childhood, and I imagine the childhood of everyone in that school, in that community. But absolutely, it changed a part of me that day. I went from being really outgoing, really bouncy, happy, confident little girl to a very fearful, confused, lost little girl. And it took a long time from that day to re-find myself and re-find that love for life and that sense of safety and security. So as much, I don't doubt that everybody has been impacted so hugely by what they experienced that day, more so than anyone else, those that lost friends, family members, loved ones. But I don't think it just fractured me. I think it fractured the country.
They came together this Mothering Sunday outside Dunblane Cathedral to reflect for a moment, to try and find, perhaps in silence, a prayer, a thought, a meaning, an answer for the destruction of so much that was so precious. And at 9:30, Dunblane was stilled. The morning service was for the children, their teacher and their families. And for the young pupils inside, a special message.
Even the grown-ups don't understand why this has happened. And when we are feeling like that, sad and confused and frightened, you know, it's not wrong to cry.
The Queen and the Princess Royal came to represent the nation's sorrow, to say to this community, the country weeps with you, we share your pain. A heartache felt by the Queen as with tears in her eyes she listened at a private meeting to the agonies of parents who lost their little ones. She talked with police officers, doctors, paramedics and nurses who were called to the gymnasium on Wednesday morning. And at the school gates, now closed for a while, she laid a wreath, Princess Anne a child's posy, these tributes to the victims of Primary 1. At Stirling Royal Infirmary, the Queen met those who were on duty on Wednesday, and privately meeting the children, they asked her where were the corgis and the crown.
I always want to remember, out of love for those lost. I've always lit candles on the day, just in memory. And for some reason, I don't know why, I've always had daffodils in the house for the anniversary. So probably the usual, and just taking that time to remember not only those that were lost, but those that were left behind and what that meant for them. But I think now I can sit there with some gratitude for who it made me, because I wouldn't be the person I am today had I not experienced what I did that day.
I will visit the cemetery. I like to go in the morning and then later on and see, like, there's quite often people still, even after all this time, leave flowers and things. Both the schools leave flowers, and I like to go and just, you know, see and read some of the messages. Yeah, a bit of reflection, and it still amazes me that people still remember, and it's touching to read, you know, comforting words from so many people after all this time, because 30 years is a long time. And that's one of the things I'm saying I forget, is how the impact it did have on the community. You know, you don't feel like it should be forgotten, you know, or the changes that were made, the lives that were lost, the comfort the community provided. There's so many things that are nice to remember. And it is a comfort. Not everybody has that, you know, for when they've lost a relative. It can be overwhelming, but it's almost always done in a kind of nice, sensitive way. Like I say, people just maybe changing their pictures to a snowdrop or something like that. And I think it's relevant that it will be covered again, with it being the 30th anniversary.
Dawn in Dunblane. Preparations for a very special delivery. The boxes hold the signatures of more than 700,000 people, loaded by some of the parents who lost their children in the shooting. Every name supports the Snowdrop campaign. Their aim's tougher gun control. It was a campaign started by local families with no direct link to the tragedy in March. Today, they wanted to show how much support they'd won.
The aims of today are to deliver to Parliament a significant volume of public opinion that says that we no longer consider that private individuals should legally own handguns.
The Dunblane families went to Whitehall, a chance to persuade politicians from all parties of the need to act. The parents have come south a week before Lord Cullen's inquiry into Dunblane finishes. They hope his recommendations will lead to changes in gun laws being made here soon.
We owed a debt to the people of Dunblane. We said MPs would vote to ban handguns. MPs have had that vote. The people have spoken. Parliament has spoken. Handguns are banned. We have honoured our debt to the people of Dunblane.
There was a lot of campaigning by people were also professionals. The media were in it a lot, trying to get these laws brought in where it's very, very difficult to own a gun. And similarly, it's very, very difficult now to be working with children without being checked at several stages for your history and your records.
One of the things that and it summed up that it happened to everyone, and that it was people who hadn't lost children who started that petition, who started that. And I think it probably needed them to do it. And I know that...
Clear heads kind of thing?
Yes, it wasn't even clear heads, it was actually having the emotional capacity to actually deal with that, having not lost a child. I think that if it had been directly the parents, it could easily have been cast aside as an emotional reaction, you know, in the grand scheme of things, in the bigger picture. But because it came from families who weren't directly affected, I think they were able to, but supported by those parents, it became something bigger.
It wasn't something that just happened overnight, hence the Snowdrop petition, which really was a petition because it wasn't accepted at first. So it wasn't something that, you know, oh, Dunblane happened and they changed the laws. There was so much work went in to try to overturn the government's opinion, many people's opinions. You know, obviously the petition, a lot of the families were involved. For some of them it was cathartic, but imagine these parents, you know, have just been through this incredible loss, yet they're campaigning because what nobody wanted was for anybody else to ever have to go through that. Yeah. And I think what's important for people to remember is that that has never happened again. And it's because, I believe it's because of the change in the gun laws. You know, you only have to look at America and now all these incidents that are happening. If they didn't have guns, didn't have access to guns, how much would that be happening? It's really quite simple. You've got a guy with a gun, a guy without a gun, or whoever. Who's most likely to cause harm? You try and take away the risk, and it's the same with security in schools. That's something else that came into place. You know, you shouldn't be able to just walk into a school. Somebody can go anywhere and try and harm people, but it's all about reducing the risk. So if we can reduce that and try and prevent it ever from happening again, and the fact is it has never happened again in the UK, and I would like to think that that's largely down to the change in the laws.
I am the father of Joaquin Oliver, and I lost my son in the Parkland shooting in the United States almost 8 years ago on Valentine's Day, 2018. To me, an example of bravery and good fight for solutions, what your society has been able to achieve. In 8 years in our country, things are actually going in the wrong direction. Joaquin, my beautiful son Joaquin, was shot 370,000 victims ago, by meaning that more and more people get shot every single day. Some people will get shot today. Some people might be getting shot right now while I'm making this video. And our country is not willing or capable of fixing this problem. We have a huge gun industry, gun lobby, big number of gun manufacturers that have total control over any law that we pretend to pass. And that's why I salute you, salute your fight and your way of being able to find solutions. I understand that when you apply common sense, that will benefit everyone, gun lovers, gun owners, and civilians in general, politicians, then we can all live in harmony and we will certainly save lives. I would love to learn more from your strategy your bravery. And I want you to receive all our respect from my wife Patricia and myself, our deep respect for how you did this, how you were able to honor your loved ones, and I'm pretty sure that wherever they are, they feel very proud and honored that they were at some point part of your life. So thank you for your example. Thank you for your input, because it means a lot. It gives us hope.
People remember Dunblane as it's like Lockerbie or Hungerford. It's one of the it's sticks in people's minds. Now, not so much in the sense when you mention Dunblane, a lot of people the first thing they'll think of is Andy Murray. Yeah. And I quite like that. You know, I think Andy Murray's a great asset to Dunblane, Andy's brother. And it's almost nice that the first thing people don't think of is the atrocity that went on, that actually there's something there that's celebrated as well.